It's the day after Christmas. A young man takes off on his motorbike and heads out to a popular trail to meet a young woman. By late evening, when he fails to return home, his parents call the police and a search gets underway. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of dozens of true crime books. I've dedicated the past 25 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Occasionally, I drive through Sterling, Connecticut, on my way into Rhode Island. And I am always taken in by the countryside and landscape, how spread out and quiet it is, the sense of community. Out here in this part of Connecticut, the Connecticut State Police are the go-to. Because the towns are so small, many of them don't have local PDs. The day after Christmas, December 26, 2016, along Dixon Road in Sterling, which is in a very secluded part of town, the state police are called out to a small four-room home with weather-stained clapboards and a red garage barn-like structure off the driveway. There are woods surrounding most of the property. It's just after 7:30 p.m. The person calling the police reports that Todd Allen, known more personally as TJ, who had just turned 18 that September, had taken off on his red and white Honda XR100 dirt bike near 12 p.m. that same day, but has not returned home. Lots of kids out here have dirt bikes and ATVs. The caller, of course, is worried that TJ maybe had an accident and is somewhere in the woods, a broken leg or worse, and cannot get to his phone to call for help. He told us he would be back by 4 p.m. TJ's parents, who had called in to report, explained to police. TJ rode these bike trails all the time, they explained. He knows the woods and the trails. It's really out of character for him not to return, TJ's parents add. They know their child, and he should be back home by now. They had called several of TJ's friends and some family members and asked if they had seen or heard from TJ, and no one had. They put out word to call around to see if anyone has seen him, and so far, no one has gotten back to them. I think you all get the picture. We begin a lot of these cases like this. Someone is not where they are supposed to be at a specific time, and loved ones begin to worry. That concern is rooted in connection, I am certain. We are connected to certain people in our lives by more than a wireless box of electronics in our pockets. There is an intuition we all have, and in some cases, it goes haywire when that connection is broken. A subsequent check on TJ's cell phone indicates that the last ping his phone had made on any tower was at 2:30 that afternoon near Margaret Henry Road, the Killingly-Sterling town line. That is right on the border of Rhode Island, about 5 minutes away from TJ's home. The state police call in the local fire department and DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, to conduct a search. The terrain is woodsy and hilly. DEEP and emergency personnel have the equipment like ATVs and four-wheel drive vehicles to conduct such a search. After several hours of probing all of the local trails, there is no sign of TJ. As I mentioned, it's very possible he could have crashed his dirt bike somewhere, fallen off the side of a hill, or any number of other possibilities. Finally, after no one can locate the kid, the state police issue a missing person teletype, which goes out to all area emergency services and law enforcement. The following day, December 27th, they continue searching to no avail. That entire week, in fact, now into January 2017, they comb through miles and miles of tough terrain, woods, lakes, rivers, door to door, and turn up nothing. The kid is, without a doubt, missing. They called him TJ, but his full name is Todd Jeremy Allen. TJ has a sister, and he was born in nearby Putnam, Connecticut. He works at Hank Graff's Antiques in Killingly, and nobody there has seen or heard from TJ in quite a while. TJ knew his way around a motorcycle, riding and also working on it. He is good with his hands and also loves wood carving and tying flies for fly fishing. His friends and family have nothing but good things to say about the boy. He's charming and kind and caring, just a good soul. One of the things TJ loves more than just about anything is tie-dye. You ask a friend or family member what is TJ's favorite thing, and they will definitely say tie-dye t-shirts. He also has this eccentric side where he will cut his hair, as his neighbor tells local media, into these crazy hairstyles. That same neighbor also mentions that TJ has a sweetness about him. With his jet black hair and sky blue eyes, a small gap between his two front teeth, TJ has this boyish magnetism that friends said made him stand out, made him special. A tall kid at 5 feet 10 inches, TJ is a bit lanky at 130 pounds. Perfect size for dirt bike riding. State police are told the last time anyone saw him, he was wearing blue jeans, a camouflage sweatshirt, and he had a backpack with him. One particular trail TJ frequently rode is called Rails to Trails, a popular place for hikers and walkers and mountain bikers. It is a trail that TJ knew very well. And I'll say most people in Connecticut frequent Rails to Trails. It sort of runs all throughout the state. There's not a chance TJ got lost or went off the trail into some sort of unknown place. Everybody knows this. A family member tells the local news that TJ rode his dirt bike every day. He would go off and his mother would say, "Be back by dark," and he would be back by dark. He's not the type of kid that just got on his bike and took off for a joyride and isn't telling anybody. There's something wrong. TJ's mother tells another news outlet, "He's a super good human being. My fear is that something's happened to him. He just wouldn't let this go on." During those first days after he is reported missing, the focus of the search zeroes in on an area in Exeter, Rhode Island, just over the Connecticut border, not far from Sterling. It's a spot known as the Arcadia Management Area. A while back, a 59-year-old woman went out for a hike along this same route and failed to return home. Apparently, she had veered off the marked yellow path and was overcome by the terrain. Volunteers and police and fire personnel conducted an extensive search but never found her. Her son didn't give up and continued the search with some friends and volunteers. Finally, her body was found in some thick brush where authorities said she had sought refuge and shelter from the elements. The trail, I'll say, under the right conditions at certain times of the year, any hiker or biker knows can be relentless. So, TJ could have also veered off the trail and ran into some trouble, which is what everyone is now thinking. Police locate a friend of TJ's he met on Instagram. She tells police she and TJ kept in daily contact through texting and Facebook Messenger, and they hung out a lot during the previous summer. She says she received 2 text messages from TJ on that day he went missing. She brings the state police her phone. The first text is time-stamped at 1:45 p.m. "I just crashed," TJ texted. A second text came in a while after that. "My leg hurts." She kept texting TJ back, but he stopped responding. This is quite alarming to everyone, as you might imagine. Here is proof via text that TJ ran into some sort of trouble, crashed his bike, and hurt his leg, possibly. He could be out in the woods somewhere, dying. Yet law enforcement knows, without saying, anyone with access to TJ's phone could have written those texts. So they need to keep an open mind and proceed with urgency and caution. Through that same girl, they get another name, a friend of TJ's who could have also heard from him. Of note, I think, is that these are people in TJ's life his immediate family might not know about. So it's easy to see how they were not contacted immediately by law enforcement. Law enforcement, in turn, had to track them down. Law enforcement heads out to interview this second person, and she is a woman in her 40s. Sitting down, troopers ask the woman if she had heard from TJ during those days before or after he went missing. She kind of looks at the 2 investigators. "Yes," she says. "When?" "Like 3 days before Christmas, I spoke to him on the phone." "What did he say?" they ask her. Her response is where this case begins to get a little complicated and start to feel like perhaps something more than crashing his motorbike is going on here. Let's take our first break, come back, and continue with more Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. I mentioned the word complicated before the break. Well, drugs complicate matters when you are investigating homicides or missing people. Now, recreational cannabis or weed has been legal for anyone older than 21 years in Connecticut since 2021, but wasn't at the time TJ went missing. And I certainly don't judge anyone who dabbles in smoking a bit of weed, no more than I would someone indulging in a drink or two. That is where we are now. So I just want to put that out there before we move forward. In talking to this new witness, she tells state police that TJ asked her if she knew anyone who could sell him 2 ounces of weed. "I told him I didn't know anyone," she says. Then he told me he was looking for someone who could, and he wanted it for that Monday or Tuesday right after Christmas, right around the time he went missing. Of course, investigators see a connection immediately. How could you not? "His father asked me to call TJ that day he went missing," she adds, "but I didn't." "Have you ever supplied him with drugs in the past?" investigators want to know. "No," she says. "I am not a drug dealer." It appears from what they have just been told that TJ bought and sold cannabis. According to this witness, he was involved in buying fairly large amounts of the drug, which now brings in another element to this. TJ could have had a substantial amount of money on him or a large amount of cannabis, hence the backpack, investigators surmise, he was said to be wearing when he left his house that last time. They then speak to a 17-year-old girl who confirms that TJ sold her weed from time to time, mostly $10 and $20 worth, she says. On that day he disappeared, this young girl says she met with TJ at around noon. They agreed via text to meet at this one particular park bench located on that trail at the end of Spring Lake Road in the town of Sterling. He texted and said he was leaving his house on his motorbike, and then he showed up at about 12:15 p.m. to meet her. She admits she bought $50 worth of weed from him, a larger amount because she had extra money from Christmas gifts. She explains that they smoked a doobie. Can you say that now, or do you say blunt? Anyway, they smoked some weed and both went their separate ways. Now, here is where the complicated part I mentioned comes into play. When investigators speak with TJ's father, he admits that he and TJ were business partners and that they had grown weed themselves over that summer. This is not necessarily a business fathers and sons generally go into together, but here we are. TJ's dad explains further how they had a contact who supplied them when the weed they had grown themselves ran out. The dad now says that he believes whatever happened to his son that day and the reason he is missing involves that woman, the 40-year-old I mentioned, the one who said she wasn't a drug dealer, the same woman TJ had called looking for 2 ounces of weed. The dad seems to think she knows what is going on here. Remember, she claimed not to be a drug dealer. But this information from TJ's father says perhaps she had lied. Go figure. Someone involved in the drug trade lying. This is why drug-related homicides become complicated, because people will lie to cover for themselves. So you are not getting accurate information coming in. This hampers any investigation. By January 9th, 2017, they get the contents of TJ's cell phone from the cloud. They confirm the weed dealing. But they also find out the last location where TJ had been when he last used his phone. It was not far from his house in that area of Margaret Henry Road, heading toward the Rhode Island border. This would have been around 2:27 p.m. and 2:40 p.m. The location for TJ's phone stops there at 2:40 p.m. and does not report any additional data after that time. So whatever happened, they are guessing, happened at that time in or at least near that location. At that location where what law enforcement refers to as semicircle bands, a technical way to explain pinging data from a cell phone, there is a residence. Now the state police seem to be getting somewhere. They have an address. And that address is the last time TJ's phone was used. Just as that information comes in, the state police get TJ's Facebook Messenger contents, which gives them all of the texting conversations TJ was having on his Messenger account leading up to his disappearance. This type of information can be a goldmine, opening up many different channels of communication and investigation. New names, that is. People TJ spoke to, no one really knew about. They soon lock onto a name, Kevin Weismore, the last person TJ spoke to on Facebook Messenger, who just happens to live where TJ's phone stopped pinging on that day he disappeared. This is why I always say there are no coincidences in murder. This type of investigation at this point becomes textbook. You just keep following the breadcrumbs. One name leads you to another, and you get into their electronics and see what's being said, what they are doing, and you either question them further or move on to the next name. Sooner or later, these investigators know they will run into the person who knows what happened to TJ. You can bet on it. Kevin Weismore is a sketchy-looking dude with bright red hair, pale white skin, and large red lips. He's 20 years old and lives in Sterling, about a 6-minute drive from TJ's house. Before heading out to speak with Weismore, they look at the conversations between Weismore and TJ. They get a feel for how they got along and the substance of their relationship. Their last conversation via text began on December 25th at 10:15 p.m. and continued throughout the night at various times until the following day, December 26th at 2:24 p.m. Remember, the state police know the last time TJ's phone shows any activity is 2:40 p.m. Based on this information, it appears that TJ went over to Weismore's house, and that was it. His phone stopped pinging off any local towers after that. And he disappeared. Now, I am not Columbo, as I have told you many times. But I would think that this is the guy you want to sit down and begin poking a finger into his chest, asking him what happened to TJ. Before they go out to speak with Weismore, however, they take a look at TJ's Messenger account more closely, specifically focused on what TJ and Weismore discussed. As they study the texts, they conclude that TJ was meeting Weismore to score 3.5 ounces of weed for about $500. That is about the extent of their relationship. They were not longtime friends or even really acquaintances. They had met somehow and began discussing a weed deal. And now nobody can find TJ. What's most interesting about all of this is the fact that as TJ's disappearance has been all over the local news and media, Kevin Weismore had not come forward to say he saw TJ on that day he went missing. That says something in and of itself. Police not only plan a visit to Weismore's house, which he lives in with his parents, but they prepare a search warrant and head over there on January 13th, 2017. As police search Weismore's house, he and his parents are asked to come down to the state police barracks and answer a few questions. They all agree. I'll get to that interview right after my final break. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. Kevin Weismore met TJ at a Christmas party a few days before Christmas, and after talking to him, agreed to sell him 1/4 pound of weed. Pretty standard drug deal, as drug deals go. More interesting here is that Weismore gives up his connection in Rhode Island and has no trouble throwing this guy under a bus. The way Sizemore tells it to investigators is he met TJ across the street from his house on that day after Christmas. They were in the woods off the main trail. As they began talking, according to Weismore, TJ walks over to a large rock and grabs a pistol he had stashed inside his backpack, and he points it at Weismore, proclaiming to him that he didn't have the money, but he still wanted the weed. I told him I couldn't give him the weed without the money, and he pointed the gun at me. That's what Weismore tells police. As they moved in closer to each other, Weismore says he took a swing at TJ's hand that he held the weapon in, hoping to perhaps knock the gun out of his hand. This kind of staggered TJ a bit, which gave Weismore, according to him, enough time to grab a knife he had in his pocket and go on the attack. I knifed TJ, he tells the police, stabbing him in the stomach once and then stabbing him in the neck a few times. TJ felt the blows and began falling to the ground. And then he tried to stand. He kept trying to get back up, Weismore explains, but he fell again because he died. TJ was breathing and gurgling, and there were sounds coming out of him. Kind of a strange way to describe murdering someone. And there seems to be something missing here. Weismore kind of lays out a self-defense argument, not realizing that he admits stabbing TJ in the stomach and neck, and that after that, TJ tried to stand up. Realizing he'd killed TJ, Weismore says he dragged TJ's body behind some brush and rocks out of sight, then took TJ's gun, walked over to a cliff not far away, and tossed it. I don't know any drug dealer who would toss a gun. They'd keep it. He then took TJ's backpack and other items and he placed them in a well in back of his house, and then he burned all of his clothes. After that, Weismore says, I went in and watched TV for a while before he then went over to another friend's house. That line, I went in and watched TV for a while. Yikes. Unable to hold the story inside of himself, Weismore says he told a few friends what happened, and they went back the next day and took TJ's motorcycle and put it in a nearby lake. Weismore then agrees to show them where TJ's body is located and where he and his friends put the motorcycle. When they find TJ, it's clear that not only was he stabbed to death, but his head had been struck many times with a large rock. Fact that Weismore failed to mention during his interview. In May 2018, Weismore pleads guilty. A few months later, he is sentenced to 40 years plus 5 years for tampering with evidence. This is Connecticut, so he will likely do, I'd say, 18 to 25 years, and then he'll get out. Before his sentencing, the prosecutor laid out quite a different scenario from what Weismore had told police. He discussed the sale of a quarter pound of marijuana with TJ and set it up to lure him to a wooded area. He brought a knife. If this was simply a drug deal, he would not have needed a knife, which he used to stab TJ in the neck, abdomen, and back. TJ attempted several times to rise from the ground, only to be stabbed again and again. TJ was stabbed 6 times, and then Weismore finished him off by hitting his head with a rock. I don't know how the defendant went home and slept when the victim was laying nearby. Of note, state police conducted an extensive search for the weapon Weismore claimed TJ had on him, and they never found it. So it's possible, and likely probable, that Kevin Weismore made up the entire self-defense argument to try to get away with robbing TJ before murdering him. TJ's mother said after sentencing, "I'm really hurt that someone hated my little boy so much that he thought he had to do that to him. People loved him. People loved having TJ come to their house, to have dinner, to have family picnics. He was loved and respected by everyone." I just want to say here before I go, there is no sensational aspect of this murder. No Dateline or 48 Hours 2020 convoluted thread of sex or spouses involved, etc. This is one of those murders police knew they would solve in a matter of time. These stories are, to me, as equally important to cover because they show us how murder, regardless of the circumstances, the motive, the lead up to it, and the overall arc of the backstory, is still the willful killing of one human being by another. In the end, murder is generally always driven primarily by the need for power, control, jealousy, or revenge. Most of the time, those emotions are driven by pain, trauma, or impulsive, out-of-control situations rather than psychopathy. So every once in a while, I will do a story like this just to point out the overall indicators of murder. Two young lives, one of course not given any chance, have been destroyed by what seems like something so trivial, a weed deal. These two had just met. They agreed to make a deal. What happened in the interim to change any of that for Kevin Weismore, who otherwise had no criminal record? Why did he stab another human being 6 times before smashing his head in with a stone? I don't even want to get into the father and how he and TJ were in the weed business together, for fear of going off on a rant that will only stress me out. Let's just say, parenting for some has changed. And let's leave that there for now. Be safe. Be aware. All of the details and conversations and quotes in this episode are from State of Connecticut arrest warrant application for Kevin Weismore, January 13th, 2017. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.